Hi, it's Jeff Cohen from the Florida Healthcare Law Firm. Welcome to the next episode of the Healthcare Disruptors Series. We've got today Sammy Tejada, the founder of Liquivida. You know who that is, and you know what that is. This guy has more video presence and media presence than just about anybody I know, so you already know him. We're gonna have a nice little chat. You're gonna find out a little bit more about him, what he's doing, what he's done, and all that good stuff. Yeah, so welcome.
Awesome.
I can't believe you can stop in on your way somewhere. I know you're going somewhere.
It's nonstop.
I know it is.
It just goes and goes. But you know, when you called, it's like, we got to make it happen.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. It's amazing to see you on the internet. The social media is like, there's an ad for something, and then there's Sam talking about something. And now you got Cory Booker that you, Jacobs that you brought in,
right.
And he's remarkable energy. I love his contribution. This Winergy that he brings in is so fun and infectious. You know,
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Powerful. You know, it's it hits like those other senses in your body that you typically don't feel with the typical marketing in the industry. You know.
Yeah, he's got. I mean, I've talked to him a little bit at dinner when we were over in Texas. And he's got such a unique view of things and what he wants to do and what he wants to bring that's unusual. And he's got his finger on the pulse, which is cool.
Right.
Well, he's a brand guy.
He is.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah.
So
Since
that's
day
cool.
one.
Yeah.
So
it's cool. Yeah. People like that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
So you're interesting to me.
Why is that?
I only know a piece of the story. I know about you and from meeting with you and helping you from a certain point on, and not early. Like you were solid and you were set before we met. And I'm just curious to know how you got there and what you come from and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, for example, where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
But came here when I was young, very young, 8 months old.
Yeah.
And youngest out of 4, and I grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Whoa.
Yeah. Dominican and Milwaukee. Can you
What was
imagine
that like, dude?
First generation. So you got mom and dad who are Dominican that grew up Dominican, right? That are in this whole new environment. It's not like Dominicans who go to New York where there's tons of other Dominicans.
Right.
We're in Wisconsin. There's white and black people.
So you were immediately embraced and everybody loved on you and couldn't wait to interact with you.
Yeah. In a nice way, maybe.
Yeah.
But it was different, because at home it was one thing, in school it was another thing.
What was that like?
So it was a bit challenging, seeing like the American traditions and growing up in that in the schools.
Yeah.
But then when you would go home, it wasn't at the house. So what you were bringing home, it wasn't there, So it was like almost I had to teach my parents about it.
Really? Because
certain holidays, Halloween. What is Halloween? We don't
it.
celebrate that in Dominican Republic.
Right.
So over here it's something big. So eventually, my parents were pretty good at adapting to it. Both professionals. They both left Dominican Republic to give us a better life. They're both architects.
Oh,
so
I didn't know
they
that.
were very successful architects in Dominican Republic. And they left everything that they had. They didn't even speak the language and came here to the United States.
What was the circumstance? You landed in what with?
So actually, there was just an article that was published with me about that, about how I'm living the American dream now. And part of it, I was actually asking my parents because I was 8 months old, so I really didn't know the reason why they came here besides giving us a better life. But my dad was telling me that they changed a few things with, immigrants getting their visa. And it was an opportunity that they had to make a choice if they're going to come here or not. And after thinking through it, they decided to make the commitment. And then my uncle Modesto, who he's still alive, he's the one who's actually been sponsoring the family to come over to the United States.
Wow.
Now, mind you, when I say the family, he's on my mom's side. They have a total of 17 brothers and sisters. They're all here in the United States.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Amazing.
So
amazing. Around the same time that they came, they were able to get their brothers and sisters here?
Little by little, there were still family members coming over when I was like 12 years old.
Right.
We were one of the first, and it worked out because my Uncle Modesto and his wife are architects, and he established a beautiful law firm in Madison, Wisconsin, and also Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he did a lot of commercial architecture work. So my parents, they didn't come here, without being prepared to work in their field. So they came over and they pretty much had work already lined up. So it was just a matter of learning the language at that point.
You make it sound so simple. That's not freaking simple.
Yeah, definitely not that simple.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not like, as you said, it's not like there was a community of people that were speaking Spanish and they're Dominican.
Right.
So you're the standout guy, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
So school was...
So it was a little bit... So,
guy.
I mean, I learned how to speak English in school.
Yeah.
Do I think that if my parents were raised here in the United States, would I have a stronger vocabulary in English? Absolutely. Because then I would have people to go home to that would help me with that.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it was one of the reasons why I'm where I'm at today, especially being the youngest out of 4. I've always had like that sense where I have to prove something,
Love that.
And
love that. And thank you so much for saying that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I've always felt like I've had to prove something, and I've always had that hustle in me since I was just a kid. Yeah.
It means a lot to me that you'd say that because, when we talk to people, they're obviously also really successful folks and have a lot of the character traits that you do. And I don't push, I don't want to, in terms of vulnerability, I don't want to probe where they're not comfortable going. And I'll tell you, you're the only guy that we've interviewed that immediately just kind of put that on the table.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my story,
Well, you know what the truth is? It is part of most successful people's story. When I'm off camera and I'm talking to these guys and I'm sharing my story too, I mean, there's 2 things that drive most successful people, especially in the healthcare space. Number 1, they got something to prove, personally.
Yeah.
Like they're not enough. You have that tape and that inclination. And number 2, they really want to help people. I just noticed that. Even when they're not saying it on camera, I know them well enough and I've known them long enough and I know their story. I know that's the 2 ingredient for success right there. You got to, just about everybody starts with that.
That's how I've always been. And, I'll go back from when I was a kid, and there were certain things that would like just program into my head where it's just like, no, I'm not going to be living through that. Seeing my parents live paycheck to paycheck, right? Seeing my mom cut napkins in half to save money, right? My father purchasing a push mower and us on Saturdays having to actually cut this yard with a push mower while all the other neighbors had regular gas lawnmowers or an electric lawnmower. It was just, for me, it was just like, no, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make enough money where I don't have to do any of this.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
It's unreal. And you had that mindset growing up?
Growing up. Oh, yeah.
Where do you think, I mean, if there is a source for it, anybody whispering in your ear about this is a great way to have a mindset?
No, I don't think anybody actually whispered that in my ear. I know that there was other people doing it. Like, this is another thing. Like, my parents were always like, you got to turn off the lights at the house. The electric bill is going to be too expensive. In my head, I was just like, why do I have to live in the dark? I don't want to live in the dark. I want all the lights on. I want this to be a beautiful home at night. It's like almost like I'm in this like little studio. So in my head, it's just like, this is not the way I want to live.
Right.
I want to be able to live where I just have that freedom to do whatever I want.
So what was the pathway when you were young, when you started to craft a pathway? What did that seem like to you?
I started hustling, making money at a young age, right?
Really?
And part of that was I was the guy who was knocking on your door. Hey, let me rake your leaves to make a buck.
No kidding. What age?
Shovel your snow. By age 10, I was
Unreal.
doing that. Yeah, I'd come home with like $300 in my pocket. My parents were like, "What are you doing with that?" Which then even that, like when I first started working, so in Dominican Republic, there's like this whole thing, at least this is what my parents told me. They said, once you start working, 20% goes to the house. So yeah, right when I started working, 20%, all my brothers and sisters, 20% goes to the house. I was in high school working as an aquatic coordinator for the YMCA, in charge of the lifeguards and swim instructors. And I remember every month I was paying my parents $500 a month because I lived in their house.
And what was your thought or your feeling about that?
I thought it was just like, I wasn't cool with it. I was just like, I didn't decide to have me. I'm like, you guys decided to have me, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but then I started really thinking about it. It's like, man, you know what? That made me who I am. So I'm very thankful of it. I don't know if I want my kids to go through it. That's one of those things where I'm kind of like still debating if I want to do something like that. But it kind of makes sense. Like even when I worked in the fire department, we always had the basically two things. We had the benevolent we would have to throw money into, which the benevolent would buy certain house items that we need, like toiletries and stuff. And then we had a little kitty, where everybody would have to put some extra money, periodically. So it's kind of like still was happening where you have to kind of give your dues into it. But yeah, that was completely different because I don't think I've had any friends that would start working from a young age that had to actually give their parents part of their check.
Dude, I don't know anyone. I know people working from a young age. I worked from a young age. Everybody I knew, that was normal. You work as soon as you can work. You feel good about it. You feel good. You have some pocket change. You could buy some stuff that mom and dad don't have to say yes or no to. I remember in my days, it was 8-track tapes. Like I could buy an 8-track tape.
Nice.
And they cost 99 cents. And some of them, if you really wanted the special ones, they were like $2.99 for an 8-track tape. But I had to get the money. But it was no big deal. It was considered normal back then. I worked in my dad's pharmacy, standing on a stool, pushing buttons, pulling levers, running the cash register. That's how I learned to count.
Yeah. You want to hear something else crazy? When I got my actual first job, because that was me like going door to door, let me shovel your snow and whatever. And I started working at the age of 12. I started working as a caddy during the summer. I had to get like a worker's permit from the public school system and everything. And my father, he ended up telling me, he says, all right, now you have your real job. Moving forward, your mother and I, all we buy you is socks and underwears.
At 12?
At 12.
Oh my God.
And guess what? I told him, I says, don't worry about the socks and underwears. And since age 12.
Oh, dude, that's so solid.
Since age 12, I mean, they put food on the table and stuff, right?
I know.
But
I love the
anything
reaction.
else,
I got this.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I bought my bikes that I had, I bought them. Any clothes that I would wear. And mind you, in high school, I graduated as best dressed, so imagine the amount of money I spent on clothes. So my first car at age 16, I bought it cash. Going into the fire academy, paramedic school, it was like about 14 grand. I paid cash for it.
Wow.
I saved up money to do it.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
So why paramedic fire? Why?
So
what called you?
I started working at the age of 14 as a dishwasher. I remember I was getting paid $4.75 an hour. Mm-hmm. And it was a restaurant, Champion Chicken in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's still around, actually. And I was 14 years old, and I remember I used to have to wash the floors and be there until 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't even think it was legal for me to do that. But they used to work me like a dog. And I remember asking for a raise. And the manager, the owner, actually was the manager, he came up the next day and says, you know what, you deserve a raise. Says,
how old were you?
I was 14.
14 years old, you asked for a raise.
And I asked for a raise.
You realize there's people 30, 40 years old that are watching this. They've never asked for a raise because they're too scared.
Oh, yeah, I asked for a raise.
Yeah.
And that actually turned up the fire. Because I got the raise, and it was 10 cents. It was 10 cents, the raise. And I was just like, no, this is not happening. Like, there's no way. So at the age of 14, I decided to go get certified as a lifeguard with the Milwaukee Public School system. Because the Milwaukee Public School had a lot of pools indoors. And
well, they're not outdoors in Milwaukee, I wouldn't think.
No, you'd be ice skating on
them. Icicle.
They have a few outdoor ones, but those are not open, only for the summer. And then got certified. And then by the age of 15, I started working with the Milwaukee Public School system as a lifeguard, making $8.50 an hour. So it was a big jump. It was almost
big.
double.
Yeah, it's big.
And so I just ended up like building a strong passion for health, safety, risk prevention, being a lifeguard. Started working for the YMCA in Milwaukee. And then when my parents decided to relocate business, my senior year in high school, it was tough on me because I had to move my senior year in high school down here to Florida. And it was actually one of the best things that ever happened because I was hanging around the wrong crew of people. Mm-hmm. All of them are still my good friends. We stay in touch. But back then it was a lot of street guys, right? And it would have got me in trouble. How a lot of them eventually got in trouble themselves. And when I moved down here, I didn't know anyone. So I had really two options: try to get back to hanging out on the street with friends, or make money. So I went to the local YMCA because I was already working for YMCA, and got a job as a lifeguard.
How old?
I was 17. So I already did like about 3 years as a lifeguard. So they saw me as an experienced lifeguard.
Yeah.
They got me trained as a swim instructor. So I was a lifeguard swim instructor. So in high school, by the age of 17, I was already, they made me an aquatic coordinator, an aquatic supervisor. So I was in charge of like 40 lifeguards and swim instructors.
At 17?
In my senior year in high school. Yeah. So I just started like working, just gained even more of a passion. I used to actually have stage fright, like speaking in front of people, but them actually giving me the opportunity to teach, easiest way to not have stage fright is teach kids. So parents thought I was like some kind of like expert at teaching swim lessons. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I saw how easy it was to influence these parents about their kids and, hey, you got to practice at home, whatever. And I just like, from there, everything just started happening. It's like I had to make a decision. Well, what am I going to do once I graduate high school? Some guy that was bringing his kid for swimming lessons at the YMCA was like, hey, I'm a firefighter paramedic. I used to be a lifeguard and did exactly what you did. Get good pay, pension. I thought it was volunteer. He's like, no, here in South Florida, it's like career. Like you start off at like $60,000 a year, you work 8 days a month. I was all right, how do I sign up for this? And the guy started giving me all the information. I was just like, perfect, that's what I want to do. So I just kept on doing the whole like rescue, saving lives, and became a paramedic. And long story short, me becoming a paramedic gave me the skills to be able to do the IV stuff, right? And
so
eventually,
when did that cross your?
So that came across. So I got licensed as a EMT firefighter paramedic by the age of 19, and then I got approached by one of the guys I went to the fire academy with this opportunity to start drawing blood for this anti-aging clinic.
You're talking about Cenogenics?
Cenogenics.
Oh, dude, that's
my buddy
funny.
came. He was like, dude,
back in the day
when they first came about.
I remember.
So I was a phlebotomist with them, and my buddy came and says, dude, I got this gig. They pay me $100 to go to a patient's home and do a blood draw. I do about 5 or 6 of them,
so funny.
And I'm done by 10 o'clock in the morning. I says, what? $600? You're done by 10 o'clock in the morning? How do I get this job? He was getting annoyed with the job because he had to deal with all these very affluent people.
Well, it was at the Boca Resort.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember.
We had about 350 patients here in South Florida, and these were some of the wealthiest of the wealthiest.
Oh yeah.
He was pissed. Oh, they got mad that I missed their IV, that doing the blood draw. They're mad that I was 2 minutes late. I said, don't be late. So I saw that as an opportunity. I was like, man, I can make that kind of money, and I can connect with some of the wealthiest people on this globe. So I took that and I ran with it. I actually did that for about 8 years. Even when I was working at the fire department, that was my part-time gig on my days off. And that's how I met Dr. Willicks.
Oh, unreal. So you and he conceived of?
So initially Dr. Willicks, Dr. Willicks.
I know Bob very well.
A little stubborn.
No, he was a wild man.
Yeah.
He was a wild man, but brilliant and wise and compassionate and short-tempered and perfect. Perfect mentor. Perfect mentor.
He reminded me a lot of my dad. My father is the same way. Yeah. So for the first few years, Dr. Willicks was just like, he really didn't pay much attention to me until the patients started saying, hey, this is the guy I want coming to my house. Like, he's on point. He gets here on time. He's professional. He doesn't dress like a scrub, and it started getting back to him. It's like, who is this guy? So At that point in time, Dr. Willix was launching a new test because the FDA was down his throat for the growth hormone stuff. They were down Cenegenics' throat. He was the chief medical officer.
Yeah.
And he started doing what was called a glucagon simulation test, which was like about 3 to 4 hours long, probably even longer than that. And he hired a nursing company to start doing the test, and they kept on just messing it up. They couldn't figure out how to do it without the blood draws that they were doing. There was a lot of hemolysis of the cells and everything.
Right.
So he decided to reach out. He said, Sam, I don't know if you can help me with this, but I hear you're good. This is what I got. Come sit with me and let me show you. Now, I was already working for the fire department for about four to 5 years. And the one thing in the fire department is that makes us really good firefighters is that you learn how to troubleshoot. Because you have no other choice. When you're in the back of that truck and your patient's dying and shit ain't working, you got to troubleshoot. You make it happen. You got to figure it out. So that's exactly what I did with this process. So he was paying all this money to this big nursing company, and all of a sudden I came in and I said, oh, we just got to do this, this, and that. And I'm just thinking like I'm in the back of the, the truck, and I got it. So I was his guy. At that point, I remember him dropping everything. He said, "This is my guy."
You became indispensable, right?
And he was like, "You're drawing my blood moving forward." He would draw his own blood. He was like, "You're coming to my house. Whatever I need, you're my guy." I was like, "Wow, I'm his guy."
Wow.
Yeah.
You get close to Bob and Franz,
right?
And that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was it.
That's special.
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
He was he became a mentor in the whole health and wellness space, and I just started learning so much about health and wellness.
He was the first guy that I met in the HRT space. Yep.
Wow.
I was complaining about how I was feeling about a lot of things at that point. I was young and I needed a mentor, and he was the perfect mentor. And at one point, he brings me in his office and he takes out this syringe. I freaking hate needles, and he jams in 1 cc of a testosterone. After he takes my blood work, and he's like, "Hey, congratulations! I was 40, I think, 1." He's like, "Hey, congratulations! You have the testosterone level of a 70-year-old man." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, is that related to anything?" So he jams me, and at the time, I'm actually riding the road bike that I bought from him. He inspired me to get into road riding.
Do a lot of that.
Yeah, and my time trials sucked. I was at the end of the pack. He gives me this boost, and all of a sudden I start moving up the pack.
Wow.
And I'm not wanting to fall asleep at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'm like, "Hey, can we do more of that?" So he's the guy who started, and we represented a bunch of HRT clinics at the time, but I wasn't a customer until I was about 41. And then I got to see how it was done, and he was incredibly generous with teaching me what I needed to know as a patient. Awesome. He always taught me, he always communicated, and I began to understand better, and of course now everybody knows about it.
Oh yeah. He would break it down to a science.
Yeah.
And that is one thing where I started just seeing, going to these very affluent individuals' homes. I used to always question myself. Mind you, I grew up in the inner city, poor, right? To then living middle class, working in the fire department, buying my first house at the age of 22, good neighborhood, to all of a sudden now I'm going to these mansions and seeing the most elite, where like I've seen life from so many lenses, and I start seeing these treatment plans that Dr. Willix has all these patients on. I'm like, why isn't this available for everybody else?
Yeah.
And then that's where the mindset are going in regards to where I'm at today, Liquivida, where I'm bringing it to the masses.
And you started with IV hydration as kind of the entry point.
Yeah. So I started with IV hydration. I'd go to their homes, and they kept on telling me about, these are people that had homes in California, Colorado, all over the place. And they started telling me about this IV nutrition, like when they're back in their homes in California or Colorado, that they do this. And the guy that typically does it is a paramedic. So I'm like, all right. So after I had like the 5th person tell me that, I started researching these people that at that point were about to be my competitors. A lot of them are actually my customers now. They buy a product. And I saw what they were doing. I was like, man, you know what? A lot of people are asking for this. I can do what they're doing, and I can do it better. So that's why I started thinking. I was like, well, I'm on a fireman's salary. I can't do too much with that, you know? So what I ended up doing, I found a doctor nearby my house. He was a chiropractor who had a facility that mixed Eastern and Western medicine together. So I started going there for some of his services, chiropractic services, and I noticed, just like most doctors, they have rooms that are empty just collecting dust. So I approached him and I told him, I said, Doc, how about if I take over this room back here that's collecting dust? I do this, all the legwork. All you do is provide the room, you provide the medical direction, the staffing, and I'll work this business division and I'll give you 20% of it.
Wow.
So for him, it's like,
Found
okay,
money.
yeah, easy
Right.
money.
Right.
And I did that, and that's Liquivida came to life.
And that was the beginning of it.
That was the beginning.
But at some point, I assume you begin to realize that you need to find a team, develop a team, find a space, get funding. How difficult, or how did you figure that out?
So I noticed that we had something at the point in time when I launched it in that doctor's office, and Liquivida wasn't even a name. And we had people driving like an hour and a half to come get these IV drips.
Wow.
And I remember saying to myself,
That's the early days.
that I was like, you know what? We got something here. People are driving an hour and a half for this juice that's going in the arm. We gotta build this thing up. So after a year of doing it on my own, that's where I decided. I said, you know what? Either I need someone to give me a big check, or I got to get other people that buy into my vision and start working the business with me through sweat equity. And that's what I did. I started a separate company called LQV Management, and I pitched the idea to, at that point in time, it was a chief medical officer that my brother worked for, this doctor, Dr. Sammy Tejada, spine joint.
Yeah, spine.
Yeah, he's an orthopedic.
Yeah.
I pitched it to him. I pitched it to our attorneys, Adam and Joe Wash, to our chief marketing officer, to the CFO, which is my wife, and then also to the CMO, Dr. Hess. So, you know, it came out where there's 5 partners. You know, majority owners were myself and my wife, and we all, for the first 4 years, we just put sweat equity into it. You know, everyone still had their full-time jobs. I was still at the fire department. My wife was doing accounting for a different franchise system, bath fitters, and we just all started working it, and then it just grew.
And now you're in how many locations?
We have over 30 locations. More than half are open.
Bricks and mortar, and beautiful.
Yeah,
With
state of the art.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love that you guys have that I've heard you teach about too is the need for clinical protocols and practices,
Right.
and the need to individualize the care and the prescription so that it ceases to be something that's so patient driven.
Right.
You know, one of the problems in the wellness space, whether it's HRT or IV hydration or med spa or whatever, is that patients create the demand, which is beautiful, but then they influence the clinicals too, because they'll just say, no, I want, and the clinicians are inclined to just give them what they want,
Right.
even though it may not match with their needs.
Exactly.
And you have done a great job, your company, of really trying to weave the clinicals back into the industry and to encourage the entire industry to do that, which I think is brilliant, needed, incredible integrity for the industry.
It's that personalized approach.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's not cookie cutter, especially when you're talking about someone's health. What works for you might not work for me.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that I really learned from Dr. Willicks, because Dr. Willicks, he would dive deep. You know, he was doing genetic testing before anyone even knew about it.
That's right.
You know, he was sending blood work off to like Spain and stuff. I was collecting the blood. Had to package it up a certain way, dry ice, this, that, and you know, it was an expensive package to ship off. I was like, where is this going? You know, I'm walking into this $15 million house, and all of a sudden I'm sending the blood somewhere in Europe, and then he's talking all this craziness about it, and now everyone's doing it. You know, so I learned a lot in regards to the personalized approach and really creating these programs to fit people's needs.
It's great, and I love that up-leveling that you're trying to get your colleagues and competitors to bake into their process.
Yeah.
It's important. It's going to serve you well in terms of the sustainability of your business. You know, I always say that healthcare, I usually say it in the context of IV hydration, but in general, lots of healthcare businesses are easy to get in. They're not easy to stay in.
No, they're not. They're
Yeah.
not.
And we see, because you text me all these new developments and regulatory developments, or these bad press items that come out.
Yeah.
So we're in constant communication with that. And the regulatory wave isn't coming, it's here. It hasn't crested.
Right.
It hadn't crested, but it's here.
Yeah. And that's where you have to stay on top of it. You got to bring as much of like the science approach to it, because a lot of the stuff that we do, there's not a lot of strong science behind it. And that's just because when you talk about like vitamins, minerals, it's like, who's going to invest that kind of money on doing research on something that you could just, you just won't get the ROI on it.
I was just going to say, somebody was asking me the other day, how come they don't do that? I said, because there's no intellectual property.
Right.
You can't patent magnesium. You can't patent,
Exactly.
nearly anything that's in the bag. Myers cocktail, you can't patent vitamin B, so nobody's going to do the clinical research to prove efficacy on the stuff that's in the bags.
Right.
There just isn't any money in it.
Yeah.
As opposed to things like Crestor and semaglutide and tirzepatide and stuff like that, where the pharmaceutical companies own that intellectual property.
Right.
So they can dump millions and then get it back on the purchase side.
Right.
But on the nutraceutical side,
It's too tough.
you can't put it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's next? What are you doing now?
So for us is, we're on the distribution side.
Yep.
We partnered up with a 503B FDA registered outsourcing facility.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing is I was 4 years into the business where I was just thinking, it's like, man, I got plans to really scale this. Like, how do we protect the industry? And that's where the fireman mode went in.
Yeah.
So in the fire department, we have something that we always say is everything has to be fireman proof. Fancy word for idiot proof. So, when we have a patient who goes into cardiac arrest...
I'm going to tell my wife that you said that. She's a retired
right,
firefighter. Sassy will be like, what did he say?
Yeah, she'll know. So, when we're in the back of the truck and a patient's in cardiac arrest, all of the medications are pre-measured, pre-dosed. You just open up the package and you're doing a bolus of it or something. Yeah. So, and that's just because you're in the back of the truck, it's moving and stuff. You don't have time to be doing these drug calculations and stuff. So when I first got into the IV space, the way I learned it from people like Dr. Guy De Silva or Dr. Mitch Genn is you were playing the role of a mad scientist. You had about 20 to 30 multi-dose vials. You're doing drug calculations. You got a sterile bag. You're creating the osmolarity. You're doing all of this crazy stuff. I'm like, no. And then they're telling you, it's like, if your nurse accidentally gives your patient too much zinc, it can cause irreversible hearing loss. It's like, that's not going to be good because it's just a matter of time or something like that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So, which we've seen it in the industry. People get too much of this, selenium, whatever, and it causes issues.
The woman down from Miami.
Right.
Selenium.
So that's why I said, you know what? We got to create something that's fireman proof. Something that's pre-measured, pre-dosed, ready to go. So what we did is we sat down with some chemists and pharmacists, and we developed the IV infusion kit. So we have about 9 different formulas, has a few vials, 3 to 4 vials max, and everything's pre-measured, pre-dosed. You just grab the vials, extract everything out of it, put it in the bag, and it's ready to go.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did that. We have over 4,000 doctors throughout the United States that buy our product. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Great.
It's actually our biggest revenue generator.
Really? Isn't that
more
something?
than the franchise?
So is that affecting your plan? I mean, in business, you try things, you have ideas about things, but you have 5 assumptions and 2 of them turn out to be on target, and 1 is a total surprise.
Yeah, I mean, so this one, the cool thing about it is, so I haven't taken any outside capital since day one. I started the company with $500 in my back pocket.
Remarkable.
And the franchise division, there's a lot of work that goes in there. You got to spend a lot of money developing the teams.
Right. And you don't get any, contrary to public perception, you don't really start getting that money back until the patient traffic picks up, which could take a couple of years or more in a site.
Or more, yeah. So
you're only getting a handful of percent.
You can sell those franchises, and some of them don't open up for a couple of years down the line.
And some don't produce.
Right, and some don't produce. You're collecting royalties, so they gotta have revenues coming in. So
harder than it looks.
The distribution outlet is what has funded the franchise business. So we've been taking money from the distribution outlet, the profits we've been making there, and building the franchise business. And now everything's starting to offset.
So they're starting to balance out.
Now we're making a lot more money on the franchise side.
Right.
And then we're recognizing a lot more of the profit on the distribution side.
That's great.
So it's been good.
That's great. What's the future look like in terms of your vision of when you grow up? What do you want it to look like?
So would like to have more locations nationwide.
Okay.
Making Liquivida more accessible to the masses. Getting more of our product into doctors' offices. Getting a lot of these traditional medicine physicians to convert more into a lot of these alternative treatments. And ultimately, my goal is to execute an exit strategy at some point.
Great.
And then move on to the next.
I love your book, by the way. What's the name of the book?
How to Win in Modern Wellness.
I loved it.
Thank you.
It's great. I mean, obviously...
You got a chapter, too.
I got a chapter. But you got some great input, but it was smart because it's... one of the hardest things to do when you're in business, and especially new in business, is to find resources that will deliver value on the spot, right? And sometimes you have to hire 3 people in a space before you find the one that you stick with. And what you ended up doing is aggregating proven value, people that are delivering value today.
Right.
And I think that's going to help people, and that's going to make their success quicker and more sustainable. So I thought that was great.
I agree. I felt like there was a need for that because, you'd go to some of these conferences like the Ivy Biz Bash, right? Yeah. And you would start hearing these people, and some of them, they've already been in business for like a year or two, and they're just like not motivated. They can't get their business to thrive. So my goal was like, let me put this book together with a bunch of people that are actually winning together in the industry and get these people hyped up, see it from the different eyes, the different lenses, right? From the legal side, from the marketing side, from the thought leaders, from the doctors, and we got a mixture of a little bit of everything in there.
I like that. Yeah. And now that you get Corey Jacobs on your team, there's that whole thing, because that's a nuanced thing, this whole brand and energy kind of thing. Yeah. It's never talked about.
No,
so now you can bring that to the table for them. Too.
Yeah, and with Corey, like one of our biggest things is he's our direct connection into the world of entertainment.
Yep.
So when you have people with such a strong voice to get this message out there about health and wellness, a few things, with all these regulatory compliance things, and you got the governing agencies with the 3-letter words that are out there.
And the windbreakers.
And the windbreakers that try to suppress everything that we do or whatever we say. When you have people that have strong voices, now you can kind of take a stronger stance against it. So that's kind of like part of my goal.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I got a question for you, just kind of dial it back a little bit. Biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is?
Biggest challenges in business, right? Yeah. Is employees. It's not the easiest. And I'm the kind of guy who always sees the best out of someone.
Yep.
So I'll invest a lot of time in people who I think I can make them into a successor. Yeah. And I've been let down a lot. Yeah. We're at that point then, to me, time is the most valuable thing you have.
Yep.
So at the point in time, I feel like my time was wasted. Time is one of those things, it's like you can't buy it and you can never get it back. Once it's gone forever. So, it's been quite often throughout the succeeding process where I feel like my time was wasted by other individuals that I was really trying to give them like a tremendous opportunity.
When you're looking at the issue of employees and team building and all that stuff, what 2 characteristics, if you will, do you find to be most difficult to get? I mean, typically you've got employees, it's easy for people to say, well, it's work ethic, but I'm curious to know what you're finding. It's like, boy, I wish they had these 2 characteristics.
So I would say one of the first things that is hard to find is finding that person who knows that no one owes them anything.
Oh, right? So like a lack of entitlement.
Yeah. So that's very difficult in today's world. It's like everyone's like entitled. Yeah. And then I'd say the second is finding people that know how to do applied learning versus academic learning. Like we could go to school and learn stuff, but how do we actually apply things that we learn into real life, and take things that you learn from experience and apply it.
So like hands-on training.
Hands-on, like making shit happen.
Yeah.
It's like I don't care how many initials you have behind your name. It's like, can you go ahead and take that information and make something out of it? Like, help us grow.
That's going to be really helpful to a lot of the folks that listen, because a lot of folks aren't just people that want to be you when they grow up. They're also people that want to work on a team like that you've built. And they're going to want to know, well, what do I got to bring to the table? And, that entitlement issue is something that a lot of people talk about that are business leaders. It's an elusive thing. It's hard to shake that up. I have an issue like that, as an employer as well. And like you do the best you can to invest and to deliver a perspective that they can, create value with, which is, hey, earn it.
Right.
You can get there, and I'll give you everything you need to be successful. And I know that you do that in your team. And, sometimes people, despite that, they're just not going to step up. And that's just the way that is,
Well, with me, like from the beginning, one of the things that I put a hyper focus on was that I wanted to build the brand of the business and not my personal brand. And the reason behind that is I remember, I was the guy doing the IVs, and when I hired our first employee, Lisa, who's still with the company, people didn't want Lisa, even though Lisa's IV skills are better than mine, right? They wanted Sam. And I was like, okay, this is becoming a personality practice. I don't want to be the one. I want to be able to work on the business, not in the business. So
wow, that perception, that's elusive among business owners. You'd think people have successful businesses, they know that. They don't.
They don't.
No, they get sucked into their business because they're working in it all the time, not on it. That's an amazing awareness and important for the listeners to hear.
Yep. So part of that is, building up the brand of the company, but throughout the years of building the brand of the company and the company growing, what ended up happening is that the company, especially when you had multiple locations, it started becoming a faceless company, right? So there goes that other side of the sword, right? So now it's just like people are coming in there, working and trying to see how they take advantage of the company, not understanding that there's real people that are losing sleep, struggling, putting sweat, tears, blood into this business. Where eventually, when I hired a publicist just a couple years ago, they're like, you got to get in front of the camera. You got to tell your story. Yeah. People have to know who you are in all these franchises and everything. So now it's just like, I go crazy on it. I mean, I'm all over. Any opportunity I get to be in front of the camera so people actually understand like who we are, what we're made up of, and it's made a difference because now those team members actually see it's like they're not just a number, they're not just working for a faceless company. Like there's real people behind this that actually care.
So you start as you're the man. You realize the limitation of that. Like you can't just be the man, otherwise you can't build a business because everybody's going to look to you, not the other team members.
Right.
And now you're back in front, visible, and you're finding that your team members are really benefited by that because it's not just a faceless company. Sam is a real person with real thoughts and somebody that has real values.
And they feel connected, right? Because my goal is creating that intimate message for them to actually feel like they're part of like this congregation that we've created.
I loved your health transformation, the way you publicized that. I know you went through a time when you said, look, I'm going to double down on my own health. Yeah. I'm going to do it in a totally transparent way. It was very inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very cool to see.
Yeah, I did it. I mean, I throughout the succeeding process, you start losing a little bit of control of your health. And I told myself, I was like, man, our mission as Liquivida is to make people feel youthful, energetic, and in control of their health. And I'm like, I'm not living that mission. I got to step it up. And I'm the kind of person where it's like, if I apply my mind to it, it's like I can make anything happen. So I did it, and I got a pretty good transformation.
You're huge, dude. It was on public to see. It was on the video all the time. Yeah. You look great, healthy. It's great to see you around. I love seeing your postings on social media. They're valuable, and I know you, so I love seeing you anyway.
I try to keep it authentic. You know, like what you see is what you're gonna get.
Yeah, man.
There's not gonna be anything crazy, and nothing pretentious. That's one thing that I don't like in business, is like when people are pretentious.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna get what you see.
It's one of the things I love about you is, and I tell people about you, I said, Sam, he's a firefighter.
Yeah.
Those guys that I know that are in the fire service or that serve in any branch, these guys are there to take care of people, and they mean it.
Right.
And they're heartfelt. You can tell, and it's a great thing. It really translates.
It is, man.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you, brother.
Awesome. Appreciate
Great
it.
seeing you.
Likewise.